WCLN 1170 Radio and Cable Channel 16 are pleased to present We Should Know, hosted by J.W. Simmons, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative as we consider closely what we should know.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We Should Know is on the air. I want to thank you for being with us today. My name is J.W. Simmons. I'm your host. We come to you each and every week on Tuesdays at 2:30, simulcast on WCLN Radio. Also, there's a replay at 7 p.m. Tuesday and Thursday. Today, we're talking about a very timely and important topic, and it deals with firearms training, and understanding the capacity and importance of firearms for law enforcement people. Our guest is Chad Thompson. Chad, you're the lead instructor, the school director, if you will, for senior firearms instructor at the North Carolina Justice Academy. This is one of those things that you have extensive credentials in. Not only you continue to be a certified law enforcement officer, but you're a Grandmaster class pistol competition person. You're internationally associated with associations throughout the world. You're a writer for Harris Publications, combat handguns and guns and weapons for law enforcement. I don't really know anyone personally, unless we get into some specialty with the military, with some of their tactical people, that has the expertise and background in North Carolina that you have. A lot of people might not know your name, but if you're a law enforcement person in North Carolina, I'd be willing to bet well over 90% will know who you are.
Agreed.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
As we start today, I want to kind of segue a post that some folks made, a person made about you. There's several out there. As you know, you're online pretty heavy. But this pretty much, to me, I tend to agree with this observation. And I won't call the person's name, but the observation was made, and this, I'm going to read it, and you see if this is something that you would comply with. It says, Chad is that rare combination of ability and passion for his work. He is never content to just talk the talk, quote. He always role models his expectation of others and never asks more of his students than he asks of himself. Is that true?
Absolutely, it's true.
Well, I thought to me, after looking at a lot of commentary, and it's been several years now since you've been on, I was looking at some new stuff, and I kept looking, and I thought, that just about sums up everybody I've talked to in law enforcement that knows you, knows what you've been doing, and knows the expectations of people when you sign off on that they've completed successfully your course.
Yes, sir.
So let's start out today, and with all the things you do at the Academy as the instructor and developer for a lot of courses. Some of that is in the area of active shooters. Some of it is carrying concealed. These courses are done and modeled, and then they're literally moved out all over the state.
That's correct.
Okay, so as these courses are done and these lesson plans come somewhere from your experience and your capacity to make sure that they're done properly and correctly. So you got a lot of instructors out there all over the state that has basically took Chad Thompson's course.
In the thousands.
Yeah, into thousands. So I'm glad you said that, because I was going to say several hundred thousand, but anyway, into thousands. So I want to get to, and I want to start with something right now. We're at the first part of going back to school. The first month or so, should you say. Still in the taste of people's mouths is Uvalde. The whole Uvalde incident, and the police chief down there has been dismissed. There was 57 minutes, I think the media reported. I don't want to get into a judgment issue on what did or did not happen. But having said that, I'd like for you, if you would, to kind of speak to responding to active shooters, what law enforcement officers are trained to do, what expectations are as folks see these things unfold on TV, and sometimes they don't follow that rule. I just want you to kind of give us a broad view of your expectations of people that you train that responds to active shooter situations.
Okay, I want to back up a little bit, if
Sure.
you will, and say In the last almost 15 years, if you wanted to be a firearms instructor in North Carolina, you had to take a class from me at the Justice Academy. If you wanted to be a specialized firearms instructor for law enforcement, if you wanted to be a concealed carry instructor for our citizens, if you wanted to be what we call a PPSB, or Private Protective Services firearms instructor, you had to take a class from me. And that's just a fancy term for armed security in North Carolina. An average of 7 to 8 of the 83-hour specialized courses, 2 at least 1-week courses for PPSB, and 1 concealed carry instructor class per month for the last almost 15 years. Wow. Every instructor that I have taught knows how I feel about this. If memory serves me correct, the statistic worldwide is that when an active shooter goes to any place, their intent is usually not to leave there with warm blood flowing through their veins. And if we don't intervene as fast as we can, a new victim is killed and or seriously injured every 5 seconds. So if you can count to 5 right now, listen to the sound of my voice, someone else has just been seriously injured or killed. What we've been teaching the entire 15 years that I've been at the Academy is, as fast as you can close the gap with that person, take them out.
It's a lot so time becomes the life-saving experience.
Absolutely. We learned with the Columbine incident that the old contain and calling the SWAT team thing just wasn't going to work. And North Carolina was ahead of the curve, in my opinion. Now, I can't speak to Uvalde. It hurt my soul. It hurt me in my heart to know that there were around 400 officers there for almost an hour and nobody did anything. In North Carolina, that should never happen.
And I think that's what folks need to hear, is that the training that you just pointed out that you have been doing and continue to do is being taught in such a way that their expectation should be that immediately action should be taken.
Immediately, without question, without verbiage, closing the gap on this person to avoid more innocent lives being lost. You touched on it a while ago. I don't know who posted that, but for the last 15 years, I've always said, you don't just talk the talk, you walk the walk. It's not going to be pleasant to be shot at. It was Sir Winston Churchill who said, nothing in life is as pleasurable as to be shot at without result. And being shot at is not something anybody wants to do. But when we put our hand on God's word and took that oath, we said we would do that. And we've got a means to return fire. Most of those poor victims don't have that means.
It is, we're in a kind of it's somewhat of a paradox in our society now, in that law enforcement people carry guns. The expectation is this idea of escalation of force. And for some, there's this large expanse that exists, that if law enforcement is involved, that there's a window of 5 minutes or 10 minutes or some period of time that they should not even expect any kind of force to be used. Kind of walk us through this in your mind as a firearms instructor, what escalation of force means in the mind of a law enforcement officer.
What we use at the Justice Academy is what they call 6 levels of force. Imagine in your mind, if you will, stair steps, 6 steps. The first step is an officer's presence. When they get on a scene, that's a level of force, because our government gives us the authority to use force to make people comply with what we say. The second is verbal commands. If you can, and that's 99% of what we'll do is just give verbal commands and people will comply. If that doesn't work, the third level is what we call soft, empty hand control. We might try to help pick a person up. We might try to twist an arm if we have to. If that doesn't work and the suspect escalates, then we go to hard, empty hand control. The 5th level is intermediate force weapons, i.e. a baton, pepper spray, a taser, and of course the 6th level is lethal force. Not just with the firearm, but any force that is intended and likely to provoke no longer having warm blood flowing through your veins. When it comes to an active shooter situation, there's absolutely no need to use the first 5 levels of force, because that person's intent is to take as many lives as they can before their life is taken by themselves or by someone else.
Do you feel like that there's a need for a greater need for what you just pointed out to be talked about and put forward in society. So folks, overall, no matter what community you come from, no matter what job you're in, no matter what your beliefs are, that these expectations is what law enforcement officers are being taught. That this is the use of force, and that continuum does not have to be followed as far as a strict, well, I do this, then I got to do this and got to do that. That can change in a split second.
Absolutely. The class that we have taught for the last 15 years at the Academy is called Solo Response to Active Shooter Situations. And I think they're changing the name to Active Assailant now, so it doesn't have to be necessarily a firearm, but it's the officer on scene doesn't wait for anyone else. It is their job solely to respond to that and save these innocent people's lives.
The thousands of law enforcement officers in North Carolina, do you feel like they have an adequate voice to help folks understand what their role is when it comes to enforcement or keeping the peace? I know a lot of sheriffs try to, communicate these things and talk to folks, but the noise is much too loud sometimes on the other side to kind of dismiss what the role of law enforcement is.
I could not agree more. Per capita, there aren't many people out in general society that are law enforcement officers. So people don't understand a lot of times. And you'll hear people try to, what I call armchair or Monday morning quarterback, and say, well, why couldn't they have done this or why couldn't they have done that? When it comes to active shooter, there's really only one response. Close the gap as fast as you can and put that person at room temperature.
When we come back from this break, I want to dig just a little deeper into the active shooter course itself, in that what does that mean for the teachers to folks that maybe are passing by or they hear something. What is their role? The average citizen that does not, maybe they don't even carry a gun. Maybe they're not a gun person. But I want to kind of talk about what their role is, particularly as it relates to seeing something on social media. Social media has become the platform. If I kind of see it as a way to find out information or what's going to happen. Look at social media. It predicts itself. We'll be back in a moment, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking with Chad Thompson, Senior Firearms Instructor, about things that impact your lives.
If you run a business, you need sales. To get sales, you need customers. To get customers, you need exposure. Let our team of experts craft and produce the perfect video ad to reach your intended audience while making the most of your advertising dollars. Call 1-800-706-6538 or visit starcom.net to contact our Star Communications production team and get your business moving to the next level.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you for being with us today. The name of the show is We Should Know. My name is J.W. Simmons. I'm your host. We're talking about a critical issue, a subject that sometimes gets a little bit cloudy in the time, should I say, of battle, and that's firearms and firearms training. In the state of North Carolina, Chad Thompson has been recognized as not only a senior firearms instructor, but for the most part, anybody that carries a gun in the state of North Carolina not only knows the name, but they've probably seen the face of either you in front of a classroom or somebody that's been in your class is now teaching them something. And we depend on people with the expertise, Chad, that you've got. One of the things that strikes me also is in your background, not only are you certified law enforcement officer, not only do you have multiple distinguished awards here, but one of the things that strikes me, there was a year that you spent literally overseas with the Department of Homeland Security, I think.
Department of State,
which puts you into an international kind of experience involving handguns. I want to touch on that, and then I want to circle back in this segment a little bit to this rapid deployment thing, because I'm not quite through with that. Tell us about that experience in your life. That sounds to be a learning experience within itself.
To say it was a learning experience is to put it mildly, yes. It was at the end of the war in Kosovo, and the UN had enacted Rule 1244, and our State Department was hiring officers who were interested and qualified to go over and assist with the what used to be an area of Serbia becoming its own country in Kosovo. And my purpose was to go and teach firearms at their police academy there. Unfortunately, while I was there, September 11th happened. And I ended up serving my last 10 months of a 1-year contract on an anti-terrorist team there in Kosovo. And I found out that money was not as important as I thought it was before I left. And I found out that although nobody ever told me anything untrue, that there was a whole lot of important things I wish I had been told before I left.
Mm-hmm. So you basically opened a new bag of tricks, but it was already once you were overseas. You then started opening a box up and you're going, whoa, where did this come from?
Yes. The rules changed dramatically with September 11th, not just in our nation, but worldwide.
But you were able to learn from that because you engaged a lot of folks and connected with a lot of folks you would never have done had you not been in that situation, correct?
That's correct. On my anti-terrorist team, I was the only person from the United States. Everyone else was from some other nation.
So, and I think that kind of adds to where I'm going next in our conversation here, is that's just another level of credentialing and experience you have had that adds to this idea of what's happening in our society now, in that we need law enforcement officers to be trained to respond in a rapid deployment situation to schools nationally and in North Carolina. And this is a conversation that's not going away. So kind of give us, I guess, some scope of understanding here. The big thing that constantly comes forward, and I have no disagreement that somebody definitely needs behavioral health if they're going to go into a school with a gun and start shooting people. The other side of that is the people that are responding do not have time. You kind of dial us in here. Look at the timeline and explain how quick these things goes down and why they're trained to immediately go where that shooter is and engage that shooter and take necessary action.
Well, because if you look at my experience in Kosovo with people that have been radicalized through religion or some type of extremist group, the correlation between those people and the types of people who do active shooters at a school or any other place is pretty close. They're pretty close to the ideology is I want to go in here and cause as much carnage and terror as I can in a quick amount of time. And no matter what the implement or the weapon is that they decide to use, what we have got to do is close the gap and get them to stop doing that. The negotiating, if you want to talk about people saying, why didn't they do this or that or the other, the negotiating is over at that point. They are the ones who made the decision to go into this soft target area, if you will, and start shooting people. And we have been training officers and I've been at the academy for almost 15 years. And to my recollection, it was actually before I got there that we have been taught to close the gap as fast as you can, deal with this person using lethal force. There's no way, the overwhelming majority of the time, I would just say 100% of the time, and don't quote me on that, but the overwhelming majority of the time, they're not to be talked down. They're not going to listen to reason. There's nothing that we can do but close the gap on them as fast as we can and shoot them.
And I think the point you're making is that there's a point that people always in their minds see, well, this person is willing to talk and we can communicate with them. But with this situation that you're discussing, an active shooter situation, if they were going to talk, they would have been talking before they walked in and shot somebody in a school.
That's correct.
And I think that's what I hear you saying is the trigger point, so should I say.
If there were some way for them to have their mind changed and them to be deprogrammed, if you will, to do something like this, it would have been before the actual incident. It would have been, the cry for help would have come a long time before they picked up a firearm of some sort and decided to start shooting innocent people.
We alluded to Uvalde a while ago, having trained all these people in North Carolina. And I would just say to folks as they're listening to this show and listening to what you said, they should expect if something happens at any of our schools in North Carolina, because I think for the most part, most officers have been through rapid deployment training.
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't know, I'm putting that as a question, I guess.
Yes. In basic law enforcement training, when a person decides to be an officer, they are exposed to rapid deployment and solo response. And then for in-service, annual in-service training, a lot of that is now devoted to solo response and rapid deployment training.
So that message is pushed forward, and that says to me, what I just heard you say is that as a citizen out here and something goes on in that school, and for anybody that may be thinking about anything evil going on, they should know that they're going to face immediate, aggressive, and deadly response.
They should absolutely know that in the back of their mind. They should know that any officer in that area, not just necessarily somebody assigned to the school, somebody assigned to that area, any officer in the area, when that call comes out, is going wide open to that area with the intent of putting them down.
And when they get there, your training, or does your training tell that officer, if there's not somebody there, you go?
Yes.
Because when this thing first started, according to the reading that I've done, when we first started talking about rapid deployment, it was like you wait till you get so many people and then you go in with a certain formation and all that. Tell us how that developed into just the officer going into the building, especially in rural areas, because you might not have somebody coming in behind you that fast.
Once the idea of special weapons and tactics came to fruition in the 70s, officers were told to contain and wait for SWAT.
Exactly.
Columbine changed that for us because so many mistakes were made during Columbine. That's when they started doing the 4 and 5 officer formations, and now we've realized that we don't even have the luxury of waiting for that. I go back to, again, if memory serves me correct, every 5 seconds someone else is shot, which is either a serious injury from gunfire or death every 5 seconds. We don't wait for anyone now. We gather the information using the totality of the circumstances at the time. If there's anybody there able to tell us what's going on, give us a description. But if we hear gunfire, our job is to go to that gunfire.
I think some of the things, not just Uvalde, but when we look back at Parkland, for example, in Florida, and the hesitancy, or should I say, the lack of movement by the officer on that campus, just created this confusion with a larger population, and media spread that without doing the hardcore detail of what you're just describing, that the expectation was that that officer should not have been outside that building. I mean, and it's sad to say, I mean, we're talking about putting yourself on the front lines with possible death, but then again, as you pointed out earlier, that's what that oath's about.
And we have a means to return fire. Those people do not. And that school resource officer, Peterson, what he didn't realize is not only was he allowing these more victims to be killed, but the other officers who responded keyed up on what he was doing. They followed his cue. He was the first person on scene, so they fell in behind him. If he's outside, maybe we should be outside as well. You're exactly correct. He should have closed the gap as fast as he could and dealt with that shooter.
So it's almost like if you don't act as an officer, and I'm letting you talk to police officers and law enforcement officers now. If you don't act as a law enforcement officer, then it sounds like what I hear you saying is that then you're culpable in the death of a lot of those people.
That is exactly what I'm saying.
I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm just trying to clarify.
Maybe I should have said it that way then, because that's exactly what I mean to say.
It's kind of sad, but this is serious, serious business.
Absolutely. You're talking about the decision between life and death, the other side of eternity, or continuing to have warm blood flowing through your veins. I'll give you just because we're going to have to go to another break, but what's your biggest concern now as it relates to training? What do you feel like that we should be doing that we're not doing, or that we have been doing that we need to do more of? In law enforcement?
Yes.
What the catchphrase now is what they call reality-based training, or RBT, where we actually put on protective gear. We make sure that nobody has any lethal firearm in the training environment, and we actually shoot each other with projectiles to make sure these officers will respond the way they're trained and supposed to respond in that type of situation. That they will actually engage that trigger, which puts in their mind, and something that being a little bit involved in this for years is you will react as you're trained to react. And that is somewhat of a misnomer. You will react the way you have mastered, because I train people all the time and then they go back on their own and master something different, and then they do not react the way they were trained. But whatever they have mastered doing this motion over and over again is the way they will actually react. And I want to follow that, and as a lead in when we come back from this break, I want to talk about that and segue that into carry concealed, because there's been a lot of changes with carry concealed since the last time you and I sat down and had a conversation.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a moment. We're talking with Chad Thompson, significant in the training in the state of North Carolina. You'll see his name on a lot of stuff when it comes to firearms and use of firearms. Stay tuned. We'll be back in a moment.
At home or away, knowing who is at your door is priceless. Star Communications is here to help with its doorbell security camera by Skybell. Live viewing and two-way audio equips you with the ability to always see and greet anyone that shows up at your door. If this is the kind of confidence you are looking for, call Star Communications today at 1-800-706-6538 to learn more about this intelligent security that you can always depend on.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thanks for being with us today. The name of the show is We Should Know. We're coming to you on Star Communications TV Channel 16, simulcast on WCLN Radio. We're talking about firearms. We're talking with Chad Thompson, internationally recognized instructor, combat master instructor with pistols. Chad, you've pretty much done it. If it involves a firearm, you've either done it, mastered it, or teaching it. So, and that could be all in that same line of thought. I don't know.
Usually all three.
So when we went to break, we were talking a bit about the kinds of expectations and the things that officers are trained to do when it comes to active shooter. And you were making a good point about police officers have been trained one way. However, sometimes they can inject something else they do at a later moment that is there. You didn't teach them that, but they're doing something different. And then when that critical moment comes, that thing that they taught themselves that you didn't could mean life or death.
That's correct. The ability to reason cognitively is out the window when you're facing a life or death situation. So what people will do is respond to what they have mastered. They won't be able to outthink poor training. The easiest word picture for me to paint for you is this. As you know, being a certified officer for years, at the 3-yard line, we have to fire 2 rounds in 2 seconds with our shooting hand only. Some officers in the past, not realizing that cognitive reasoning is out the window, would unsnap their holster when the instructor wasn't looking to make sure they could get those 2 rounds off in 2 seconds. And then when they were attacked with lethal force, they were unable to remember and realize why they couldn't get their gun out of the holster. And all it was the simple motion of pushing that thumb brake, because they had trained their body to grab the gun and lift up, grab the gun and lift up, when they should have been grab the gun while I'm breaking this thumb snap and then lift the gun up. And they were unable to realize what was going on. Some of them paid with their lives and some of them paid with serious injury.
And I think that kind of unfolds into something. I was looking at some training a while back that dealt with actually removing yourself from a vehicle to train yourself how to unbuckle that seat belt, which is a little bit alien to you. And then all of a sudden you go through the training and then all of a sudden you catch yourself and you're trying to do it the same way. But if you're in a patrol vehicle and you're trying to get out, that's that second that you're going to get killed. That's
it. And any new officer who has ever had a suspect to start running on foot has experienced that, because they have caught themselves up in the seatbelt. That kind of thing it becomes paramount when milliseconds are the difference between living and dying.
There's so much here that we got to unpack. I want to try to get everything in as I can, but there's just, as we talk, things come to mind that I want people to know about. And I've had folks to ask me about traffic stops. Well, I was trying to get so-and-so, and that officer seemed like he just got to my window like that. Folks don't understand if you're stopping a car, if any of the training that I've seen, you're stopping a vehicle, you want to get out of that car quick as you can with your eyes on that person and get there so you can see what's going on. You don't want to sit in the car. Well, folks don't understand, that's not you being, that's not the officer being mean or hateful. They're trying to get to a strategic point where they can observe. Speak to that, and then we're going to go into carry concealed, I promise.
In 2022, still today, the second most dangerous circumstance that we face as sworn law enforcement is a vehicle stop. The first most, of course, is domestic violence calls. We still teach our officers in basic law enforcement today to put their hand on the back of that vehicle, if it has a trunk, a passenger car, to push down on it for more than one reason. To make sure that if was someone in there, they're unable to jump out and attack them. But in case they are murdered on the spot in their uniform, hopefully fingerprint and DNA evidence will help convict the person who killed them. So if citizens don't think the stress level is high on a vehicle stop, they've got another thought coming. And that's the reason that we do that.
It's probably the thing that concerns me most today for law enforcement is the unknown in an increasingly violent society. It's just oftentimes I say it's an upside down world. And it don't matter whether you're at a ball game, whether you're at church, the vulnerability continues to increase.
Sadly, that's true.
So I want to segue into what I really wanted to get into today. And again, like I say, I could probably get you to come back for several sessions, but I want to get into carry and conceal. There seems to be a lot of questions. There seems to be a number of folks that's gone through carry and concealed in the past years, and there's been a lot of changes going on. Talk to us about carry and concealed. What's a citizen's role? What can they do? What they can't do? Why does somebody want to carry concealed? And let's get into that discussion.
Well, you said it. Today, it's a ever increasingly dangerous society today. We've got more people on earth than we've had before, and per capita, we've got more either evil people or insane people out there who are subject to hurt somebody, not just law enforcement officers, but citizens as well. Our legislature passed concealed carry in 1995. Since 1995, there have been myriad changes to the law. So if people got their concealed carry permit in, the mid to late 90s, even the early 2000s, there have been changes to the law that they may not have been made aware of. If they had their permit, all they had to do was renew it every 5 years. Since we were talking about vehicle stops, I'll just start with vehicle stops. If a concealed carry permittee is stopped by a law enforcement officer, the most prudent thing for them to do is not reach for anything. We have some instructors, and you've seen the video series that I started, that have been telling their people to have the card and the driver's license ready for inspection. The officer is going to be viewing that citizen from the back. That movement that is required to remove my wallet is the same movement that's required for me to pull a handgun off of my hip. Don't reach for anything. Keep both hands on the steering wheel with the fingertips in the air. Roll both windows down, passenger side and driver side, and if it's dark, turn the interior light on. Make eye contact with the officer, and here's why. In our society, making eye contact increases my believability. Mm-hmm. In our society, it cements our relationship. When I'm looking you eye to eye, I'm not being deceptive, and I have a relationship with you now. Look at the officer in the eye. I tell people all the time, and they say, insert whatever excuse, smile at the officer. Smile at him or her. And the first thing out of their mouth should be, I am a concealed carry permittee, then, and I am armed. Our state law says upon approach. What case law has said is at the earliest feasible opportunity. I got to let that officer know if they're approaching me in an official capacity that I'm a concealed carry permittee and that I'm armed. So many citizens will make the mistake of saying, hey, I got a gun. And then the officer starts saying, let me see your hands, what are you carrying a gun for? And then when they try to announce, and I'm a concealed carry permittee, all that gets muddied up in it. The first thing they should say is, I'm a concealed carry permittee, slight pause there, and I am armed. Keep the palms on the steering wheel with the fingertips in the air.
I think that's probably, when you alluded to some of the videos you're doing online, if folks will look at some of those, that will be very helpful, because you go through that in accurate detail. When a person's considering, do I need to carry a handgun? Do I need to carry a weapon? There's carry concealed, and then there's this thing that is called plain sight. So you can carry a gun in plain sight. Totally confusing to people.
Right.
I see folks sometimes, and I'm sure you do too, at gas stations or what have you, they got a gun on, and I look at them and I look at the gun and I'm thinking, I look at them, do I need to change pumps here or what? You know what I'm saying? So help us understand that.
Okay, first thing I want to say is this. There are two things in your life that you never want to watch being made. One is law, the other is sausage. You'll probably lose your appetite for both of those. So in North Carolina, we have 3 different sets of laws, and people have a hard time understanding this. And I know, I eat, sleep, and breathe this, but we have constitutional law, which is what you're alluding to. We have common law in North Carolina, and then we have statutory authority. Our Constitution allows our citizens to carry in the open most of the time, just open carry. If any portion of that firearm is exposed, to let the casual observer know it's a firearm, they're good to go. Now, it's not infallible, but most of the time. What you also deal with is people that will say there is a common law known as going armed to the terror of the people. And there is a common law known as that. But I read case law voraciously. I love case law. Of the thousands of convictions of going armed to the terror in North Carolina, you won't find one where someone was simply carrying a firearm. There's always been some other overt act associated with that. Making verbal threats to someone, obvious intoxication, celebratory gunfire. That has always been there as an overt act, not just carrying the firearm or the handgun, as we're speaking about concealed carry. Now, since '95, they can also obtain the statutory authority to hide that handgun or series of handguns on or about their person. So there's 3 different sets of laws that people need to be apprised of: constitutional law, common law, and then statutory law.
And each one of those impacts what you can and can't do, or at least what you could use if you have to end up in court.
That's correct. And depending on the area that you are, you could be allowed to carry in the open and not concealed. You could be allowed to carry concealed but not in the open. There's some areas that you can't be armed, period. But knowing the law is paramount to staying out of trouble.
And some places you go in, if it's posted, no firearms allowed, then you're expected to follow that request.
That's correct.
The other thing that I thought was interesting too is that the number of firearms that you can carry. And then you had a comment regards to that as the number of firearms, the times that maybe you should or shouldn't. So I'll let you cover that.
Unfortunately, we have some instructors that misunderstand these 3 different laws. And they have been telling their students incorrectly, that once you gain the statutory authority to hide a handgun on you, you lose the ability to carry in the open. And that's not true. These same instructors were saying, since it's a concealed carry handgun permit, not a weapons permit, and that's true, that you can only carry 1 handgun at a time. That is not so. As many handguns as you are comfortable carrying on your body is the correct number of times. And as you said, there's 2 times in your life you can have too many handguns or too many bullets if you're swimming or on fire. Other than that, the magic number is how many are you comfortable when you're out in whatever area you're traveling.
Yeah, and the situation going on in society now, you may feel like you need to carry multiple with some backup around somewhere. That when you see a lot of things going on, we're going to go to the break in just a minute, so I don't want to get you on another thought, but we're coming up on our last segment. So I want to continue this process with carrying concealed and let you just kind of walk through the process that somebody needs to think about if they want to go through a carrying concealed class. What they need to do, if they need to go get a permit, if they don't, what the expectations are in class. So we'll touch on that when we come back. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We're talking about whether you need to carry concealed or not and what you need to do. We'll be back in a moment.
To get the most out of your electronic devices, you need a strong internet connection and a protected home Wi-Fi network. You need high-speed internet from Star. Star has the fastest, most affordable high-speed internet service available for all your devices. We have no long-term contracts or high-pressure sales. Our service speaks for itself, and switching is hassle-free. We take care of everything with free installation from a local company. High-speed internet from Star. Internet at the speed of life.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you for being with us today. We're talking with Chad Thompson, firearms instructor. As we said in the beginning, multiple levels of certifications, nationally, internationally, state of North Carolina. If it's law enforcement in North Carolina, somewhere you've touched that document that officers are being trained with. As we went to break, we were talking about carrying concealed. Same with carrying concealed. And that is a civilian's right in one of those areas we discussed previously to carry a concealed weapon. I want to pick it up there, Chad, and let you expand to us and help us understand what you need to do if you choose to carry concealed in North Carolina.
First of all, we have a concealed carry handgun permit. North Carolina is not like some states that actually do have a concealed carry weapons permit. The only thing that you're allowed to carry in North Carolina is a handgun or handguns with the permit. People need to think about it if they decide they are going to carry concealed and make sure it is for them. If you have heard this adage, it is just as accurate today as when it was first coined, but people who aren't willing to use a firearm would be better off in a volatile situation not to have it, because a person who is determined can take that firearm from them and use it against them. If they decide they want to carry concealed, the first thing that they need to do is find an instructor that is commission certified, which means they have taken a concealed carry instructor class from me at the Justice Academy, and they are a firearms instructor from one of these 5 entities: the National Rifle Association, the U.S. Concealed Carry Association, North Carolina Law Enforcement, North Carolina Private Protective Services, or North Carolina Department of Adult Corrections firearms instructor. Once they find the instructor that they want, they have to take an at least 8-hour course on handguns, North Carolina law, marksmanship fundamentals, etc., and then a qualification course of at least 30 rounds, 10 rounds fired from the 3, 5, and 7 yard line. They have to take a written exam that's in the back of the red book from the North Carolina Justice Academy. Written exam is in the back of the book, several samples of shooting exams in there, and once that instructor deems that they're qualified, they get a certificate of completion. They take that certificate of completion to the sheriff of the county they reside. They pay the fee, get fingerprinted, have to sign a release. The sheriff checks their background, checks their mental health. When they get their concealed carry permit, it is good for 5 years. It needs to be renewed every 5 years, and they can carry a concealed handgun or handguns on their person.
Tell us what renewal means and what do you have to do to renew?
The permit is good for a 5-year period, and usually what I recommend is about 90 days before it expires. Contact the sheriff's office of the county that they reside, find out what their rules are, because there's 100 counties, by proxy 100 sheriffs in North Carolina, could be about 100 different ways of doing this. Mm-hmm. Let the sheriff's office tell them what they need to do. They go in and just renew that permit.
And so it's a relatively straightforward, simple process. Now, in that process, you mentioned what the sheriff does as far as checking, or the sheriff's office checks the background. A person has to be a citizen, I think, is part of that process, a citizen of the United States. Is that correct?
They have to be a North Carolina resident, and now one of the changes is either a United States citizen or they must have a permanent resident card.
Okay, so those pieces are critical. The enforcement piece, if somebody does have that carry concealed, they happen to be stopped and they're not in a vehicle and they have carry concealed on them, they're walking down the street somewhere and somebody notices a weapon on them, a handgun on them, and they're stopped. They should have identification on them showing their certification credentials?
State law requires if they leave one of these 3 places, their home, their business, or property that they own, and they have a concealed handgun on or about their person, they must have some form of valid ID and the permit card itself. Most of the time, not infallibly, but most of the time it'll be a driver's license. They should have that driver's license and that permit card on them. I want to impress upon the viewers, they're only required to let the officer know they are a permittee and that they're armed if the officer is talking to them in an official capacity. Okay. If the officer approaches them and, let me see your ID, you fit the description for someone, it's a vehicle stop. The reason I say that is we had a gentleman who was not trained properly a few years ago who happened to approach an officer at the Sanford Christmas parade and just announced to him that he was carrying a concealed handgun. And it startled the officer, and he asked why he was telling him that, and he said, my concealed carry instructor told me to let any officer know that I see that I'm carrying a concealed handgun. And that's the kind of thing that we don't need to be proliferated out there. If they're talking to you in an official capacity, you're required by law to let them know. Say you're a permittee first and that you are carrying a concealed handgun. Keep the hands visible so the officer knows you're not trying to hurt them. But if it's just, it's been a beautiful day today, has it not? The citizen should say, it certainly has, and keep on getting it.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of this is just kind of the surprise mentality. You don't want to have a conversation in official capacity and not do that. At the same time, you don't necessarily want to agitate something that don't need to be agitated.
That's correct.
Speak to the Castle Doctrine.
The Castle Doctrine was updated, if you will, in North Carolina.
Indeed.
In 2013. It was 1451.1 that has been superseded now by 1451.2. And anyone can look it up and read it, but the 2 major changes are this. The burden is now on the state. The state says that we presume that the person inside that dwelling holds a reasonable fear of death, great bodily harm, or sexual assault if someone has entered that dwelling or is attempting to enter that dwelling at the time. The second change is it is not just their home now. A citizen's home. It can be a citizen's outbuilding if they're using it to lay their head down. It can be their hotel room, their recreational vehicle, their motor vehicle, their tent in a campground, whatever is a temporary domicile at the time, the Castle Doctrine now applies.
But does it apply for you're in a particular area of the state and you're outside of your vehicle and you're trying to get back in your vehicle, and does the Castle Doctrine apply to that vehicle?
It does not. If the citizen is outside the vehicle, it does not apply.
But if they're inside the vehicle?
If they're inside the vehicle now, that is considered their temporary domicile.
And I think that particular piece is one that I hear more and more that folks are confused or concerned about.
You're right. A lot of people have mistakenly called, when we updated our Castle Doctrine, they called it, that's a stand your ground law. North Carolina does not have a stand your ground law.
Two different things.
It's two different things. And I tell people all the time when I'm teaching the instructors who then go out and teach the citizens, if the choice for a citizen is to turn tail and run or potentially take someone's life, just turn tail and run. Mm-hmm. The last thing that they want to do is shoot another person.
That's probably, we could say that over and over and over. That stands to be true, because that it's not shame or anything, but just get out of there. Just leave the premises.
That's it.
Wherever you're at. And I think a lot of times folks get totally off course with that. So when we look at carry and conceal, we're looping back now. We're leaving the Castle Doctrine. We're back on carry and conceal. When we get back to the carry and conceal, are you seeing an escalation in the state of folks that are carrying concealed, or is there a way you look at? I'm sure you look at a lot of data. Is that moving up with the number of people that are trying to find a way to protect themselves?
It most certainly is. Not only is the population of our state rising, but exponentially, the number of people who obtain and desire to obtain their concealed carry permits is rising. North Carolina, we honor any other state's concealed carry permit. So the reciprocity that we have with other states enables people who have moved to North Carolina from other areas to also carry here under the reciprocal agreement. Some states, such as Virginia, for example, will allow North Carolina citizens to obtain what they call a non-resident permit. They take a 1-hour online class, they pay $40, and they obtain a Virginia non-resident permit, which our state has to honor. If they want that fixed, they have to approach it from a legislative level.
But right now, that is the quote law.
That is the quote law. It is perfectly legal for a citizen to do that.
Where are we going with handgun training for civilians? Do you see that in the carry concealed world? Do you see that going up and the time shorter as far as recertifications? You know, we know law enforcement has to recertify annually, and some of the departments train quarterly with firearms. Some don't, but the state mandate, they got to at least qualify annually if they're going to carry that gun as a law enforcement officer. So some officers may say, well, I just decided to quit doing my law enforcement certification, and now I'll use my carry and conceal because I can go anywhere in the state.
Some officers do choose to get a concealed carry permit, not just to be able to carry, but also to purchase firearms. In North Carolina, you are no longer required to get a purchase permit from your county sheriff when you can show your concealed carry card.
Because typically that's duplicity.
That's exactly correct.
So that would be an advantage if somebody is looking to buy or own or have a firearm in their residence.
That's correct.
So I want to try to get this in, and is this idea, once you do that and you're thinking through this process, a piece that is, I think, critical, at least in my opinion. What do you do with that firearm that you now have a carry and conceal permit for? As you said, it could be 1 or 10. What do you do with that, and what is the importance of making sure that it is secure in your home and not concealed, secure?
It depends on the person, and I go in depth with the yellow book for instructors and the red book for citizens. It depends on the person. For example, if they want to keep that firearm, not just a handgun, but any firearm in the home for home protection, know your capabilities and know what you can do and what you cannot do. Here's what I drive at. If people know that they're a really hard sleeper and they wake up groggy, if they have what they call night terrors, if they sleepwalk, then the ideal thing would be to keep that firearm away from their immediate grasp so they don't wake up not having full control of their faculties and injure themselves or someone else. If the person knows themselves more than their doctor does, if they hear a mouse squeak, they wake up and they've got full control of their mental faculties, then they might be able to keep that firearm closer to them.
We're going to take a break, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back in a moment. Stay with us for We Should Know Overtime, and may God bless.
To hear more of today's intriguing conversation, please join us for We Should Know Overtime, available on Star Communications YouTube channel, as well as video on demand found on your Star TV service.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host J.W. Simmons. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion regarding this or any episode, please send your emails to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.